Hi everyone. For this exercise we're going to be using the work of Charles Dana Gibson, who was a turn of the 19th century American illustrator. We're going to be using his work as a jumping off point to learning about watercolor portraiture. So Dana Gibson famously created illustrations at the turn of the century of the feminine ideal of the time, so women with long necks, straight noses, noble foreheads, and this aesthetic came to be actually known as the Gibson girl. The great thing about Gibson's work is that his illustrations are similar to draft drawings for paintings, so he uses heavy contrast between light and dark, and shading with line work that follows the volume of the face or whatever object he's depicting. We're going to use these lines to guide our brushstroke, and then we're going to build color with a combination that we already know works well with skin tones. The most important colors we're going to be using here are Mayberry Blue's Primary Cyan and Cadmium Red, which in this version appears quite orange. I love the shade Shadow Violet by Daniel Smith as a way to add depth to the painting, but you can use a mix of Burnt Sienna and Ultramarine if you don't have that. And then Burnt Sienna in general is great for flesh tones, so we'll use that. And then I'll use a bit of Potter's Pink on the lips, although you can use any different red from the primary reds that you're using for this. So Alizarin Crimson or anything that you might have on hand. The brushes I'm going to be using are flat brushes, and I really like flat brushes because you can use the edges to get details, but also cover a large range of surfaces at the same time. And then I'm just using a small watercolor block. If you like the flesh tone I'm using in this demonstration though, I would urge you to simply buy the exact same colors and brands I'm using. They may seem expensive, but actually with these high pigment artist grade watercolors, you'll only end up needing to use a tiny amount. So one of the secrets of watercolor portraiture, and one of the things that makes it really engaging, is that you don't necessarily want to work from what you see in the way you would with an oil painting. You're not going to be able to match the depth of colors of many photographs unless you saturate your watercolors to the point where you might as well be using gouache. So instead, to avoid your watercolor portraits looking washed out, it can be useful to decide for yourself beforehand a few formulas for making skin tones, using your knowledge of the planes and volume of the human face, so this requires study, and working with only a black and white reference as base, so you can focus purely on creating balance of colors within the painting. As humans, we're attuned to patterns more than anything when it comes to observing faces. And if your patterns, by which I mean light following basic rules and colors being organized into warm and cool based on the planes of the face, if your patterns are strong and logical, the eye will read your painting as realistic even if the colors that you're using are quite different to what they'd be in a photo reference. For example, look at these two portraits. Both are of the same photo reference. However, the first was made by tracing a photograph and then approximating the colors within the photo reference. Even though it's traced, it appears washed out and flat. This second portrait, however, was made using the photo reference only as a jumping off point, with instead focus placed on pre-existing knowledge about the planes of the face, and then a simple limited palette. Instead of trying to force the medium to copy a photograph here, instead of trying to hide brushstrokes, I make them consistent and visible by using a flat brush and also tell the viewer a bit about the layering process by leaving the color washes deconstructed. It's not a perfect painting, and it's not an exact replica of my photo reference, but because it's governed by consistency, simplicity, and organization, it's far more readable than the first. You can use this logic in your own work, even as a very beginner artist, by organizing at least one stylistic component of your work. This might mean making all of your brush strokes move in the same direction, or using a purposefully limited palette. So back to Gibson's work. Let's start by doing a quick sketch from this reference. You can draw along if you like. So first I'm going to draw a line showing the outer corner of the face. So I'm just plotting that out on my paper, and I'm also going to add in a bit of information about the chin. I'm just getting a bit of information about the hand down, Now this line, I'm putting down a line to show the angle of the eyebrows, the eyes, the bottom of the nose, and the bottom of the lips. And now essentially I'm drawing what's called a line of action down the center of the face. So that's down from the middle of the eyebrows to the middle of the dimple at the bottom of the chin. And carving out the nose from this structure that I've put down. Okay, now moving on to the eyes, it's really important that the eyes are symmetrical, so just adding in a bit of an eyelash. And Gibson's work makes it a bit easy in that the eyes are much larger, so you don't need to worry about getting them too exact. And I'm marking off the area on the nose that's going to be shaded, as well as the philtrum, so the Cupid's bow, that's also known as. And then the lips, I'm organizing around that horizontal axis that I've put down early on. And now just carving out the dimple of the chin and a bit of the forehead. And now I can actually carve out the left-hand side of the cheek. And I'm looking at the volume of the hair. So I'm not thinking about individual hairs, I'm thinking about the main volumes of the shape of the hair. I'm just going to put a little notch for the ear. And a mark showing where the hand is going to be. So we won't do too much detail on the hands and arms, but we're just getting those in so that we have a bit of context. And now I'm just marking off where the area of shadow is going to be on the neck and a bit of the wrist. Let's just get the shoulders in. And the top plane of the hair. Okay, so on to painting. First, we're going to be applying that primary cyan as a base. I'm using my flat brush to follow Gibson's line work in this illustration. The great thing about a flat brush is that you can use it to describe volume depending on what angles you use it in. So the way you move your brush can very quickly describe the volume of, say, a cheekbone or an eye socket. And now next, I'm surrounding the areas that I'm going to maintain as highlights, so the very lightest part, where we're not going to paint anything, so blank paper, with a very, very dilute amount of burnt sienna. And a fairly dry brush, so wet enough not to leave hair marks from the brush, but dry enough that it's transferring little more than pigment to the paper. So I don't want this water kind of bleeding into the highlights. I want it very dry. Okay, now I'm going to be applying that cadmium red. I'm adding a more concentrated layer of paint in darker areas like the eyes. You can get a lot done with this combination, and the transformative effect is fun to watch. Just remember though that your colors are likely going to lighten up upon drawing, so you might need to add more depth. Okay, so I'm now using some sepia and adding it to burnt sienna for the hair. Because I'm using burnt sienna as one of my skin tones, this will allow me to blend the hair into the face in a way that will ensure it doesn't seem like a wig. So remember that the hair will always reflect off the face, so there'll be a little bit of shadow and also a little bit of reflected color from the hair. I'm also adding a little bit more cadmium red to show the reflection of the hair on the face. And then I'm going to move back in and warm up my values by using some more cadmium red. So my paints will have lightened as they've dried. I'm going to work in some of that warmth by using a mix of burnt sienna and cadmium red. You want to be mindful how your paint is drying. I'm going to move on to the background just so that my paint on my painting has a little chance to dry before moving back in when it's pretty dry with the final crisper details. Okay, and finally the fun part, I'm going to be using shadow violet to do the eyebrows, nostrils, eyelashes, and sides of the lips. And then I'm going to use some burnt sienna and sepia on a spot-by-spot basis. I'm adding a little bit of Potter's Pink to the lips for some local color. You can use alizarin crimson, any different type of red. Essentially a wash over the lips. You've already got that volume down. This will add a bit of local color. So I'd encourage you just to kind of practice with this idea of working from a black and white reference, even working from a drawn reference of an artist that you like, so just a pencil drawing, and experimenting with your skin tones on the paper rather than trying to focus too much in the very beginning on working directly from a photograph. You might also want to study a bit about the planes of the face. I'll put up a few exercises about that in just a bit, as that can really help you direct your light and make a readable painting. So I hope you enjoy, and remember to share your work. If you hashtag Soho_life_drawing on Instagram, we'll be able to see it. Okay, thanks.